You might not be able to solve that problem, but you can bring about an impact. I just think sometimes if you want to bring about a change in your world, it can be as simple as thanking someone. Be nicer to the person. My mother always used to say, a problem shared is a problem halved. Welcome to the latest edition of the Mastermind for Business podcast. This podcast is for you if you have a successful service business, but you feel like you're a slave to it and you just feel like that you're trapped by the business. If you'd like to spend more time in your life and less time in your business, then you're in the right place. And that's what we're going to talk about in every episode. In today's episode, we're talking about the concept of belief and how it can not just be a powerful tool, but it can be a powerful barrier. And in particular, we're going to talk about the imposter syndrome. Joining me in the studio is in fact no one. Nick is on holidays as we head away for the approaching Christmas and end of year celebrations. So Nick's away, so it's just me. But I hope you get some value out of today as we talk about the imposter syndrome.
If you want more time, money, freedom, and have a business that's not reliant on you, then you're in the right place. Each week, Mark Creedon, along with some of the very best business minds in the world, will take you through simple, practical steps you can take to create the business you always wanted. From his own practical experience, Mark will show you how to work less, make more, and get the business you always wanted, the one that you deserve. Now here's your host, one of Australia's most sought-after business coaches, Mark Creedon.
Let's talk about what the imposter syndrome is. We ran a session on the Gold Coast. So in our mastermind program every year at the Gold Coast, 3 times a year, we get all of our members together from across Australia and New Zealand, and we talk about a particular aspect of the business. Now, normally it's around things that they need to do to scale themselves out of the business, but the most recent one we did just a month ago was all about the concept of belief, and it's coming off the Belief Blueprint, which is my new book that will be launched in very early in the first quarter of next year, the Belief Blueprint. And I wanted to talk about how important and powerful the concept of belief is in running your business, and more importantly, in giving you the opportunity to scale yourself out of your business. In other words, have a business which is a lot less reliant on you. And one of the components of belief is a lack of belief or the imposter syndrome. And the imposter syndrome is really one of those things where you really feel like you're not good enough, like you don't deserve the success you've got. And I think one of the really big things about the imposter syndrome is that you can kind of get to the point where you just think one of these days you're going to get caught, right? They're going to find out that you're nowhere near as good as you think you are. It can be completely debilitating. I don't know any successful person who hasn't in the past or doesn't still to some degree suffer from the imposter syndrome. And I still get it from time to time. I mean, coaching highly successful entrepreneurs, helping them to scale themselves out of the business. And sometimes I still think, oh man, one of these days they're going to find out that I don't know as much as they think I do. And I think there's a couple of ways that you can move past it. The sooner you can move past it, the better it is. So today I'm going to show you 2 ways. The first way is a 6-step process. So you might need to listen to this episode at a time when you can make some notes. If you're driving in your car right now or going for a walk or whatever you're doing, you can make some notes. I'm going to take you through a 6-step process, pretty simple 6-step process, which has been proven to help people move past the imposter syndrome. And then I'm going to share with you a very simple 1-step process that I use and I've used all the time to help me move past. So let's talk about the imposter syndrome and really what it is. So we've said that it's that feeling, and it's like a feeling in your gut, right? We've spoken a lot in the past about the gut-brain connection, but it's that feeling in your gut where you just think, I don't know, I'm not that good. They're going to find out, right? They're just going to cotton on that I'm not all I'm cracked up to be. I don't deserve this level of success. And one of the real issues with the imposter syndrome is it can lead to an element of self-sabotage. So if you let the imposter syndrome win, if it's that little person sitting on your shoulder saying to you, listen, I don't know that you're really worth this. I don't know that you can do this. Or, one of these days they're going to find out that you're not as cracked up as you think you are. If you let that voice win, it can, in all likelihood, lead to self-sabotage. That's where you start to go, well, you know what? I actually don't deserve this. I'm not this good. I'm going to do something that's going to blow this whole thing up. And we've all seen it. I've certainly blown my career up in the past, many, many years ago. That was the imposter syndrome there, where I was having success. I didn't believe that I deserved it. I didn't believe that it was worthy, that I was worthy. And so if you let the imposter syndrome win, you then move into potential self-sabotage and completely undoing the success that you have achieved. So what we need to do is work out, how do we stop this bugger from actually getting the better of us and winning? And that's what the 6-step process I want to take you through. So number one is to sit down and write out a bunch of achievements. I reckon probably 5 to 10. Now, the really important thing with this first step is they have to be achievements that are quite specific. So they can't just be, I've been successful, or I had a great year, or, I won that contract. But it's got to be, I attended, I met people, I, schmoozed, or whatever it was that you did. I used my skills and convinced people that I was the right person for the role, for the job, to get the contract, whatever it might be. And I secured a $200,000 contract. So you've got to be as specific as you can. Step number one, write down 5 to 10 achievements that you've accumulated over the last few years. So you can go back 2 or 3 years. And again, the important part is to be as specific as you possibly can be, right? That's step number one. Step number two, next to each of those achievements, you need to look at, what is the key skill or strength that I used in order to achieve that? So what's the key skill, strength, or quality that I had? So maybe it's quality of persistence, maybe it's resilience, and maybe it's reliability, maybe it's knowledge and skills in your field of expertise. Maybe you really showed that you are truly a subject matter expert in your field. But the concept is, beside each of those 5 to 10 achievements, to write down what is the quality, the skill, or the strength that you used. And again, write as many of those as you can. And what we do then is we move to step 3. So step 3 is to look for a pattern, right? List the skills and the strengths that show up repeatedly. Because what that shows is that the success that you achieved was not a fluke. Because that's what the imposter syndrome does to you as well, right? It says that, if you've achieved something really good, it kind of taps you on the shoulder and goes, yeah, okay. So you're pretty good, right? You've had a win. But you know what? You fluked it, right? You were in the right place at the right time, or you knew the person, or they were just being nice to you, or whatever it might be. It can be a really nasty little bugger, right? And it can come in and sort of really undermine your confidence and your self-belief, which is really what it does. So you want to be as clear as you can, as specific as you can on the achievements in step number 1. And then in step number 2, you want to list as many strengths as you possibly can. Step number 3 then is to look for a pattern. Because from that pattern, it proves that it's not a fluke, and it's confirmation that you can actually achieve this time and time again, right? You can rinse and repeat it. Step number 4 is to talk to people who know you well. Now, whether this is your workmates, your colleagues, your family, friends, associates, mentors, your coach, speak to people who know you and actually show them these patterns and say to them, look, I've made a list of all of my achievements and I've made a list of the qualities, and this is a pattern I've got. And what you're looking for their confirmation that what you did is and what you achieved is not a fluke. the patterns that you've found in your qualities and skills and behavior is not an abnormality. It's not a fluke. It's not anything unusual or out of the ordinary. It is, in fact, you. And so once you've got that confirmation, it makes it very easy the next time that the imposter syndrome kicks in for you to go, okay, hang on a second, right? I'm thinking, do I deserve this? Are they going to find out at some stage? Am I going to get caught out for being, a bit of a fluker? Well, hang on a second. Let me just go back. So I've achieved this in the past, and these are the skills that I used. And not just once, but these skills have shown up in a pattern several times. And when I spoke to the people who I respect, admire, work with, as the case may be, they confirmed for me. And then finally, I think step number 6 is to create some affirmations of that. So I can achieve this because I can achieve success in this area because I have this skill or quality. I can do this because I have this quality, this skill, this mindset, whatever it might be. So if you go through that 6-step process, step number 1 is to make the list. Step number 2 is beside each of those achievements to put the quality or skill or mindset that you've had. Step number 3 is to look for some patterns. Number 4 is to have them confirmed, right? Actually talk to somebody else and get those patterns confirmed. Number 5 is to then look back, and the next time that imposter syndrome turns up is to use those patterns to prove that it's wrong. I mean, this is how you rid yourself of limiting beliefs. And limiting beliefs, can I tell you, belief is an incredibly powerful tool. And we're going to talk a lot more about that in the belief blueprint that you'll be able to get your hands on in the first quarter of next year. But belief is an amazingly powerful tool, but can also be an amazingly powerful barrier if we don't treat it right. And so all we're doing here is when those limiting beliefs, that imposter syndrome turns up, we're simply saying, hang on a second, wait, I actually have proof. I've got some confirmation that this wasn't a fluke. I've got some confirmation that these are the skills that I've been able to use time and time again. And on that basis, imposter syndrome, you can go away. And then finally, step number 6 is to create yourself some affirmations. I'm a big fan of visual affirmations. So if you can find a way that you can have those affirmations around you and really clear, then you're going to find that that's going to be much easier for you to be able to remind yourself, and that the next time that imposter syndrome visits, remind yourself via that affirmation that, hang on, I've got these skills and I know what I'm doing. I can move past all that stuff. In a second, I'm going to share with you a really simple way that I learned to overcome imposter syndrome. We'll do that in just a sec. I heard this from, and I have to give credit to Vin Jiang. So Vin's an amazing public speaker, public speaking trainer. And I heard this first from Vin, and I loved it so much that I applied it. So it's about changing the way you look at the imposter syndrome. So what we often do, I think, when the imposter syndrome comes along and it says, listen, you're not worth that, you're not worthy of achieving that, they're going to find out about you. We sort of take that as an attack, and it has a massive negative connotation to it, right? And then that's when we can sort of wallow into it. It's like a big pit that we can fall into. And once you fall into that pit, it's really hard to get yourself out of it. Because once you're in that pit, that's when that self-sabotage starts to come in. Oh, I'm right, this imposter syndrome is correct, and I'm not worthy of it, etc. Instead, when I do feel that imposter syndrome coming along, I actually stop and thank it. So I turn it into a positive, right? And I stop seeing it as an enemy and start seeing it as a friend. So essentially, if I get that imposter syndrome feeling, I sort of stop and go, you know what? Thank you. That's a great reminder for me to stay on my game, kind of to be rubbish at what I do, right? You know what? You're right. Maybe I'm not as good as I think I am. So I need to keep improving. I need to keep learning, developing, working on myself. Thank you for reminding me of that. I think it was Oscar Wilde that said, a true friend stabs you in the front. And I take the imposter syndrome as that true friend. So rather than feeling like it's an enemy that's stabbing me in the back, I take it as a friend. It's stabbing me in the front, and it's just reminding me. And the minute I took that view and I changed my way of looking at things and turned it into, hey, wait, Mark, like, don't be shit at what you're doing, right? The minute I started seeing it that way, and it stopped being a threat to me, it stopped being a stab in the back, it started being a stab in the front, and it served me as a reminder to stay on top of my game, to not get complacent, to keep getting better, to stay sharp. And as soon as I changed that thinking, then what happened is the imposter syndrome became a powerful friend, a powerful tool, and a way of reminding me of the value of that as a reminder, right? Of being constantly aware of not being a dick, not getting ahead of myself, not being so full of myself that I think that I'm infallible, and knowing that I'm I'm going to make mistakes, that I may not be as always on my game as I'd like to be. So I've got to keep doing things to improve it. And the minute I started thinking of things in that fashion, it changed for me quite dramatically. And that change is what helped me to get rid of the imposter syndrome. So here's the trick for you. The next time the imposter syndrome comes along and taps you on the shoulder, I want you to think of one of two things. I want you to think of either the 6-step process. Just think about, what are the achievements you've got? What are the skills and qualities and mindset that you had that helped you to achieve them? What's the pattern that comes from it? Who can confirm that for you, and create some affirmations and remind yourself when that comes along that, you know what, you are actually pretty good. And here's proof. It's not just you. It's not just you, talking yourself up. There's actually proof here. The other way, and you can use a bit of both, is just to go, you know what, thank you. Thank you for reminding me. I mean, I got to stay on top of my game, right? I got to not be shit at what I do. I've really got to stay on top of this. And the minute that you do that, either of those approaches, whichever works for you, and sometimes you might need to go, yeah, do you know what, thanks for reminding me. But hang on a second. That hasn't really worked for me. Well, hang on, let's just go back and see what I've achieved and how I've achieved it. And I think when you go back and start looking at it in that model or in that methodology, it's so much easier to deal with the imposter syndrome. Don't let the imposter syndrome take you over. Don't let it run your life. Let it be that friend, as Oscar Wilde says, who stabs you in the front. Treat it as a friend, and you'll get on top of it much more easily. I was having a good chat with Mick Donaldson. So Mick's been a guest on this podcast in the past. He's a good mate of mine who's a former SAS patrol commander. And he was talking about all of the things that are going on in the world at the moment. And this is not a platform for political comment, but let's talk about things that are going on in the Middle East, things that are going on in Ukraine, all over the world. And essentially he was talking about some numbers that were just really horrific in terms of the number of people that have died in conflict in the last 12 months, the number of women who have been kidnapped and forced into slavery, and most abhorrently, I think the number of children that have also been either adopted out illegally, kidnapped, or forced into slavery. And unfortunately, some of that is in child trafficking for sex purposes. So it's really horrific when you look at those numbers. But that wasn't the end of the story. The purpose of Mick's story was, whilst we can't change that, we can change something. And what we can do is we can influence our world, our sphere of influence. So it's like a pebble in a pond. You're right, you drop a pebble in a pond and all of the ripples start to move out in those concentric circles. We might not be able to go and influence what's happening in Ukraine or the Middle East. We may not be able to influence what's happening in another city, another state, and even another suburb from us. But what we can do is we can influence what's happening around us. And the challenge that he put out to the team that we were talking to, and the challenge that I then put out to our mastermind members, is what is something that you can do? What is something that you can do that brings about a positive influence within your circle of influence? Now, you have a number of circles of influence, right? You have family, friends, community, workplace. And so the question that I'd like to pose to you, and it was a really interesting exercise that we did, where we went about going, okay, let's look at those four. in terms of my family, what's something that I can do in the next 10 days that's going to bring about a positive influence in my family? Whether it's spending more time with them, whether it's teaching them something, whether it's giving them something, whether it's creating an opportunity for them, whatever it might be, what's something that you can do in the next 7 to 10 days that is actually going to bring about a positive influence on that circle of your family? And then once you've given that some thought, apply the same principle to your friends. What's something that I might be able to do that's actually going to be an influence on my friends? It was really interesting. I did this exercise with Mick and I thought about my family, and I thought about what are some of the things that I could do for my kids and my grandkids. For my friends, I rang some friends who I think are good friends, but because of time, we just let time get in the way. And, sometimes it's just reaching out and going, hey, are you okay? I haven't heard from you for a while, and or as I said to one of my, to my very best mate, I sent him a message going, hey, listen, I'm sorry, I've been a really shit mate. We haven't spoken for a while, and that's just not good enough for me. And it was really nice. He came back and went, look, I'm the same. It's a two-way street, but it's so good to hear from you, and let's catch up. And that was an opportunity for him to share what was going on in his life and to lighten the load, the burden for him, because he had somebody to share it. My mother always used to say, a problem shared is a problem halved. In my community, is it something as simple as I went and got a whole bunch of books that I didn't need anymore, and I took them to the local book library and donated those books, and really simple stuff. We put some Christmas lights up and make the kids feel like, the kids in the neighborhood, pictures of Santa Claus and inflatable Santa Clauses and stuff like that. So again, just little things that you can influence. Now, all of those things, and then the final thing is the workplace. And I looked around the workplace and I thought, who here can I help to be a little bit better at what they do? Who here can I help to be a little bit better at what they do, and to help them to be a better version of themselves in the workplace environment? And so it was interesting to sort of take those 4 areas and go, now, if I do all of those 4 things, that's not going to stop the war in Ukraine. That's not going to stop. It's not going to bring peace to the Middle East. But what it is going to do is it's going to have a ripple effect. Because if I can do that in those 4 areas of my life, and in each of those 4 areas, there are people that do that in areas of their life as well, and then we start that, stone in the pond effect. So it was a really eye-opening moment just to go, you know what, you can sit and shake your head at all of these horrible statistics that come out on the basis of, quite legitimately on the basis of, well, there's nothing I can do about it. And you're right, but there is something you can do. You might not be able to solve that problem, but you can bring about an impact. And this is the message I want to leave you with, is what is something that you can do within your circles of influence that's actually going to bring about some positive impact? What can you do in the next 7 to 10 days? And, they don't have to be big things. You don't have to go and donate $1 million. Great if you can afford that, but it doesn't have to be a big thing. It doesn't have to be a showy thing. You don't have to film it and put it on social media. It might be something really small. Maybe it's a conversation with someone. Maybe it's checking in on someone. Maybe it's congratulating someone for work that they've done. Maybe it's just congratulating someone for effort they've put in. Maybe it's a smile. One of the things I always like to do, I always like, because I've got a number of friends and family who've served in the military, anytime I see a service person, I always thank them for their service. But, I do the same thing. I do the same thing for our emergency services personnel, police, fire, paramedics. If I see them, I thank them for their service. And it's amazing how much. I remember I was in Sydney a few months back, and I was walking through Potts Point, and there was a couple of army personnel walking next to me, and I saw them, turned around and saw them, and I went, oh, hey guys, thank you for your service. And they just sort of stopped and went, whoa, we don't hear that very often. I went, well, you know what, you should. You should. Whether you agree in military or whatever your particular viewpoint might be, the reality is these guys and girls are serving. They're serving, and they're serving our purpose, and we live the life we do because of people like that. And I always say that to my mate Mick. We live the life of freedom and privilege we do because of people like him. And I just think sometimes if you want to bring about a change in your world, it can be as simple as thanking someone. Be nicer to the person that you buy your coffee from. Pay it forward. pay, a coffee in advance, whatever it might be. They don't have to be big things. This isn't about business, but it is about making the world just a bit of a nicer place. And that's a good time for us to wrap this episode up. These are the sort of things, maybe not the last couple of stuff, but these are the sort of things we talk about all the time in our Mastermind Business Accelerator program. If you'd like more information, metropolemastermind.com.au. And please, between now and when we chat next, whatever you do, make sure you spend time with those who matter most.